a guy that can shoot out of that two-guard spot is going to be crucial this year as well, especially after the struggles they had last year in part due to all the injuries. So, again, it really just depends on what Anthony Harris' status is. But I think R.J. Davis is a good pick there as well. And I think that, Puff Johnson sitting down there in fifth, I think it's a little misleading because the guys that are ahead of them all will probably have pretty decent impacts this year. I think, when you look at him, he's very similar to his brother. He's a guy that I think is going to be able to help Carolina behind the arc, which is an area that they really struggled a year ago. There's got to be a better shooting team this year if they want to win games in the ACC and be up in that range where you're talking about, which I agree would be where I see a successful year. And I think he could end up helping out a lot more. I think, when you look at that group, there's a legit chance that 5 of the 6 freshmen could play a pretty significant role this year out of the gate.
Yeah, when I look at R.J. Davis, Carolina's going to need him to produce, whether it's starting and then moving to the bench or whether he's a straight bench player. But the fact remains the same that he's got to put the ball in the basket, whether as a two-guard or there may be times he will be the backup point guard with Jeremiah Francis transferring to New Mexico. And so that's why I have him that high, because the backcourt production has to be mightily better and more consistent than it was last year. Now, granted, it's all going to really depend on the health, and we all know the insane amount of injuries this team went through a year ago, but that's part of the game. It mounted on Carolina the longer the season grew, but it happens to the best of us, and we had to get through it. But if they're healthy, they've got to produce consistently. And, you mentioned you got to temper expectations, and you're right. You got to remember these are 18, 19-year-old kids that are taking a big step up from high school and AAU ball to the toughest and deepest conference in college basketball. But, when you put on that, when you commit to Carolina and you put on that jersey, along with it comes an expectation to play the game at a high level. I do think Puff Johnson will have a bigger role than what being fifth on my list does entail. I do think he will be a consistent part of that second-man unit, and maybe Kerwin Walton sneaks in there as too, just because we don't know if Andrew Platek's going to put the ball in the basket. We don't know if Leaky Black's going to put the ball in the basket. If not, I don't think Roy Williams will be as hesitant to play the young kids if he thinks they can produce and not beat you. If they're going to score and they're going to play quality defense, they're going to get time on the floor no matter the fact that they're a freshman, because they don't have a choice. Because and then we'll move into the big man part of this, breaking down the impact. You thought you were going to get a lot from Armando Bacot last year. And while, he had the second most double-doubles as a freshman, that was kind of misleading because the second half of the year he would show up one game and not show up the next. I don't think he was completely healthy a year ago, but that's, you could use that as an excuse. A lot of talent with Walker Kessler, a lot of talent with Day'Ron Sharp, but with that talent comes a lot of question marks.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of a similar situation to last year. There's raw talent there for both guys. The difference this year, you got 2 very different type of players. Day'Ron Sharp is your typical big man, back you down, physical guy on the inside. And then you got Walker Kessler, who can stretch the floor. I mean, he's a guy that he's got the height of 7 foot to play the 5 right in the center of your offense. But he's got the shooting ability where, I'm not going to say you ever would, but he's similar to Luke May in the fact where if you played him at the 3, he has enough shooting ability where he would still be all right and probably have a chance to still thrive. That's the unique thing about this team this year, is that this is the first time in a while, probably since those John Henson days, where you really feel like the best offense that you have, without a doubt, is to put it inside, because you don't have 1 or 2 very talented big men. You might be able to make the case that your 4 best players this year at one point in the season are down low. That's something that we haven't been able to say in a while. So I expect that you're going to see a lot of different lineups down there. You know, this past year, when you looked at it, you know, we saw Armando Bacot come out late in the year. Who did they end up having to put in? Walker Kessler ended up Walker Miller ended up having to come in. You saw, you know, other guys like Brandon Huffman even get time as well. That is not going to be the case this year. And I think that's going to be part of the reason why, if you see one of these guys struggle, even if it's Garrison Brooks, if there's a time where he's struggling and other guys behind him, like Kessler or Sharp or Bacot, if they end up starting one of the other true freshmen, which is a possibility that I think we do have to address. Nothing is really given. I think Garrison Brooks will I would be willing to bet Garrison Brooks will start. The other three will be battling, I believe, for a starting job here up until the season starts. They're going to roll with the hot hit, whoever it is. So everybody needs to elevate their game, and I honestly think that's going to be the best thing for all of these guys, especially Armando Bacot. And I think that's one of the biggest things that people are going to be talking about this offseason is, you know, is Armando really the Armando that we thought we were going to get? I think last year, you know, we saw flashes from him at times. You know, game against Oregon comes to mind. But, you know, we kind of wonder how much the injury that he suffered in the game against Virginia, the game against Ohio State, we wonder how much that really affected him. You know, I think he played through the injury and started to show a little bit towards the end of the season. Now, with a chance to be fully healthy, with some more competition behind him, and him knowing that really he can't afford to have a bad year or else he will not play that much, I think there'll be a little bit of extra motivation, and I think that this Carolina team is set to have a very good unit down low that could be led by Armando Bacot and Garrison Brooks, but we'll also have really good guys coming off the bench in Walker Kessler and Davon Sharp as well.
The last few years, Carolina's, you know, still stayed at the top of the country in terms of all the rebounding stats that you value: rebounds per game, offensive rebounds, whatnot. But they were doing it as a committee. Even your guards and your small forwards were getting to the backboards. You can make the case that Carolina could dominate with just their four big men during the season and hold their own on the boards, where you don't got to send so many other people to go get rebounds, because there is a lot of talent down low. When I look at how this is all going to work out, there's going to be a lot of different lineups that you mentioned that figure out who plays best with who. Excuse me, because if someone beats out Armando Bacot, let's say Davon Sharp beats out, or even Walker Kessler, then you can move Garrison Brooks to the four, where he's a more natural four-man. Excuse me again. And there's just going to be so much. I think there's a lot of versatility down low that you're going to have, even more so when you have Luke May, who could stretch out and play a stretch four. You could have Walker Kessler as your five and Garrison Brooks, and that's going to spread the floor more for your guards to drive and kick out. And Garrison Brooks developed a jump shot last year. Walker Kessler coming in, we already know, can step out and consistently hit the three-pointer. That's what I'm looking at to see. And I think you brought up a good point. Bringing in two more five-star big men, that just breeds competition down low. It's going to make the guys better that are already there. You're going to maybe see a more motivated Armando Bacot, because playing time isn't a guarantee this year. Whereas last year, no, it was a given. You were going to play. That's not the case, but I do think you're going to see Carolina be as dominant inside with just their bigs, since you mentioned those John Henson, Tyler Zeller days where they had James McAdoo coming off the bench. They're kind of back to that situation this year.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the only thing that I would say is maybe comparable is there's a chance that you could see a guy like Sharp or Kessler, if they can prove enough, sort of make the move like we saw Tony Bradley do a couple of years ago, where even though they don't get a ton of playing time, if they show enough to where they feel that they can get into that first round of the NBA draft, we could see them leave. But I think that's the solution for this team, is that last year, you know, we just didn't know what Garrison Brooks was yet. We didn't know if he would be able to elevate it to that level. I don't think anybody was even really labeling that as an expectation. They just wanted to see him take a step forward. We knew that Armando Bacot was a freshman as well. So we didn't know if the inside was going to be an area where we could count on there being success. We didn't learn that until middle of the year, and even when we did learn that, there were still times where we just went away from it for some reason. I feel like this year it's going to be different, and I feel like the staff is also going to make sure that it's known by the guys on the floor that, look, you need to go through your inside players because they are the best players on this team right now. They have the best chance to be able to knock down shots. And I think one of the things that also has to improve, and this is for the big guys especially, is last year we saw there were times where Carolina was able to get to the line a lot with their big men because they were able to get inside and really start taking over and dominating some of these smaller teams and some of these less talented big men. But the solution was, well, put them on the foul line because they're not a great free throw shooting team. That's something that we've seen Roy Williams pride himself on. It's always something that he makes sure is a focus in the offseason if his team struggles. During the season, he'll also try to make sure that if his team isn't shooting well, he can get them back on the right track. Last year, unfortunately, he wasn't able to do that. This offseason, I think it's going to be a huge focus of him to say, look, we have got to improve as a free throw shooting team. Last year, we didn't shoot the ball well from the perimeter. This year, we're not guaranteed to shoot it well from there once again. But we need to be able to capitalize where we're getting the high percentage looks, which is inside and at the free throw line. So I expect that that's going to be an area where they're going to be focused on this year. And again, the big men are the guys that you really have to see that improvement from because we should expect to see them getting the ball a lot more.
Yeah, I think you bring up a fantastic point with Carolina's got to be more efficient at the foul line. You can go back to Garrison Brooks, and he had his struggles in the countless of games last year, whether it was Boston College, Duke, whatever you want to go to. He had his struggles. Armando Bacot at times was inconsistent. That's, I always like to say you miss 2 free throws as a silent turnover. And at the end of the day, you can look at it, Carolina's losses, and if they would have shot 70% from the foul line, they would have won a handful of more games than they did, and maybe the season goes a little bit differently. So the one thing to take away from all this conversation is that there's simply no denying that Carolina is going to be heavily dependent on freshman production for the first time in a long time. And the question that comes with it overall is the coaching staff prepared to get them to play at a high level? Because this isn't Duke, this isn't Kentucky or even Kansas, where they've moved to the one and done model a lot quicker than we have, and they've had their fair share of successes. Carolina's been a little bit more lenient and hesitant. The NCAA investigation kind of played a role into that. But there is some question marks about, is Roy Williams and this staff the right staff to lead all this kind of talent and get the most out of it and get this team deep into the NCAA tournament?
I think the way that you phrase that might be a little confusing. It's more of, does the staff and their systems work for one-and-done guys? That's the biggest thing that, like you said, they've been able to do at places like Kentucky, places like Kansas, places like Duke. But even if this system doesn't work with that, which, again, this will be the second year in a row where we're going to be able to kind of find that out. And I think, if it doesn't work again this year, I think going forward, the staff is going to adjust how they recruit, who they end up recruiting. Guys that may want to stay a little bit longer, guys that just fit their system better. But, I'm not out on the thought that there's a chance that this could work. I think if it doesn't work, the other thing that Carolina has going in its favor is that we now see that the G League is starting to become an area where guys are going to be able to go and play if they want to just end up skipping the college ranks. I think that's going to kind of thin out some of the guys that actually, don't want or really just there for 1 year, not really worried about winning a championship, just worried about building their own profile, things like that. I don't know if any of the guys from last year were like that. I don't know if that was the mindset coming in for Cole Anthony or Armando Bacot. I don't think that was the case. I think both of those guys just, had their struggles adjusting to the college game. But I think that could help sort of weed out some of these 5 stars that, potentially Carolina would have to recruit, mainly just because of how talented they are. So I think when you